I never used to mind working late at the self-storage facility. In fact, I liked the quiet. Just me, my audiobooks, and the soft hum of fluorescent lights while the world outside faded to black. The other attendants avoided the night shifts, but I took everyone I could. It was easy money, and honestly, most nights were so uneventful I could finish a novel and still sweep the office twice. It was last Thursday when things stopped feeling routine. I remember the first odd thing happened before it was even fully dark. I was finishing up paperwork behind the counter, glancing every so often at the grainy security monitors. There's a long corridor lined with roll-up units, all identical, all painted a peeling gray, that runs along the back of the lot. On the camera, I saw a shape moving, just barely inside the threshold of one of those units, number 117. A shadow, maybe. That's what I told myself. But I'd just locked up that row not 20 minutes earlier. I flicked through the other camera feeds. Nothing. The lot was empty except for a battered sedan parked by the gate, a tenant who said he'd be gone by 6. I sat up, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the camera, maybe a moth or a branch swaying too close to the lens. But the air in the office felt tight all of a sudden, like someone had turned down the oxygen. I stood grabbing the heavy ring of keys and stepped outside. The dusk had that odd silvery quality, not quite day, not quite night. The corridor between the units was colder than it should have been, and each step echoed louder than I expected, bouncing off the metal doors. There were no footprints on the gravel, no signs anyone had been around. I reached unit 117, my skin prickling. The padlock was still fastened. I tried the door anyway, rattling it. Nothing. Nothing. I even knelt to peer through the tiny gap at the bottom, but all I saw was the concrete floor and the edge of a cardboard box. I laughed at myself, too loud, forcing it. Probably a trick of the light or a bug close to the lens, I thought. As I walked back, I noticed the smell, like old paper and something faintly chemical, sharp and bitter, almost like cleaner but off somehow. It wasn't there earlier. I paused, sniffed the cuffs of my jacket, wondering if I'd spilled something. But it clung to the air, trailing me back to the office. The second thing was harder to shake. Around 9 p.m., with the lot fully dark and only my desk lamp glowing, the intercom buzzed. That was odd. No one ever used it at night. I picked up, expecting a customer locked out, or someone pushing past closing time. But there wasn't any voice. Just a sound. Faint, irregular, wet, like someone chewing or shifting their tongue, too close to the mouthpiece. I listened for a few seconds longer than I meant to, hoping for words, but only got a sudden burst of static. I hung up, thinking it had to be a wiring glitch, maybe water in the line. I made a note to tell Frank, the day manager, but my hand was trembling as I wrote. I tried to distract myself, pretending to do inventory. Every now and then I'd glance at the monitor, catching movement in my periphery that would vanish by the time I looked. My own reflection in the office window started to bother me. In the glass, the whole lot behind me looked a shade too dark, the rows of units stretching on like a maze with no end. At 10:12, the silence broke again. It was a bang, loud enough to make me flinch, metal on metal, echoing down the corridor. It sounded like someone had slammed one of the roll-up doors as hard as they could. I froze, pen clattering onto the counter. The security monitors vibrated slightly in their plastic frames. I waited, holding my breath, convinced whoever made the noise would appear on camera. Some late-night thief or a drunk tenant? But all the feeds showed was stillness. Too much stillness. Even the cheap plastic flags near the entrance, which always fluttered in the breeze, hung limp and dead. I told myself to do my job to check it out, but every step toward the door felt heavier. My shoes dragged on the old linoleum. Outside, the cold had deepened. Fog had crept in from the empty lots behind, swirling in patches around the unit doors. The air stung my nose with that chemical paper smell, denser now, coating the back of my throat. My flashlight shook in my hand as I swept the beam down the corridor. Unit 117 looked exactly as before. Padlock in place, door shut tight. But 3 units further down, number 120, the door was open just a crack. No one ever leaves their unit unlatched at night. I called out, voice cracking a little. "Hello? We're closed. If anyone's here, you need to leave." My words felt small, swallowed up by the rows of metal and the fog rolling low over the gravel. There was no answer, but something moved inside the unit. Just a shuffling, barely audible, but enough to make my scalp prickle. I told myself it was a raccoon maybe, or a stray cat. Against all better judgment, I stepped closer, shining the light into the gap. Dull. All I saw were boxes stacked to the ceiling, and an old tarp slumped in one corner. The tarp shifted, just a little, as if exhaling. I nearly dropped the flashlight. My hand banged the door, setting off another metallic echo. All at once, the smell hit me full force. Not just chemical, but now sweet and rotting, like an old refrigerator left unplugged too long. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the gravel. No one followed me out, and the door to 120 didn't move again. I forced myself to do another sweep of the lot, my breath coming too fast, counting every padlock, as if that would hold the world together. Every unit was secure, except 120. I relocked it, telling myself I'd report it in the morning, and retreated to the office. I washed my hands in the little sink, scrubbing until my skin was pink. I could still smell that sweetness under my nails. My mouth tasted metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue. For a while, nothing happened. I sat at the counter with both hands around my coffee mug, watching the monitors. The static on the feeds was thicker than before, swirling across certain cameras in a way that almost looked like shapes, faces, or hands, gone before I could focus. My phone buzzed with a spam call, and the normalcy of it rattled me more than anything. I tried to call my friend Derek, but the signal wouldn't hold. Just a hollow ring, and then silence. It was almost midnight when the lights in the corridor started to flicker. First one, then another, each stuttering out with a heavy metallic click. I watched on the screens as the darkness crept up the row, swallowing each patch of light, until only the one nearest the office remained, buzzing and pale. I stood, unsure whether to lock the office door or run outside and reset the breaker. The smell was back, stronger than ever, and my hands wouldn't keep still. My eyes kept drifting to the window, to my own reflection, but something was wrong with the angle. My reflection was facing slightly away from me, shoulder turned, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I blinked hard, pressing my knuckles to my eyes, but when I looked again, the reflection stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on mine, unblinking, and too dark. A clatter erupted outside, sharp and decisive, not like before, not distant. This was right outside the office, on the concrete step. I jerked away from the window, heart hammering so loud I thought I'd drown out the sound, and fumbled for the keys with numb fingers. The doorknob felt oily in my grip as I locked it, double-checking the deadbolt, though the gesture felt pointless against whatever was out there. I crouched behind the counter, phone in hand, trying 911. The screen glared back at me, frozen, no bars, no numbers, just that mocking digital clock ticking over to 12:1. The seconds stuttered, then sped up, flipping numbers so quickly I dropped the phone on the tile. Outside, the fog pressed up against the glass, swirling in slow, hungry circles. I heard footsteps then, too many to belong to one person, shuffling in gravel, moving up and down the rows. It sounded like a crowd, a restless parade. But the camera showed nothing, only the static, thick as snowfall now, crawling up the screens, obscuring everything except the dim outline of Unit 117. Its padlock glinted in a way I hadn't noticed, not reflecting the light, but dull, almost pulsing, like a living thing drawing breath. A knock came at the office door. Not a pounding, not angry, patient, measured. The door vibrated under each tap like it was holding back a tide. I didn't breathe, didn't dare move. I waited for a voice to call out, for any rational explanation. But there was only the knock, again and again, steady as a metronome. I pressed myself lower, as if the cheap countertop could shield me, sweat crawling down my spine. Then, silence. A long, absolute silence, thick enough to make my ears ring. I counted out 30 heartbeats before I risked peering over the counter. The office was unchanged except for one thing: the reflection in the window. It was gone. The glass showed only swirling fog and the faint glow of a dying lamp. I stared at my own absence, feeling weightless, untethered. For a second I wondered if I'd left my body entirely, or if something else had stepped in. The intercom crackled awake, a soft, wet clicking, the same sound I'd heard before, but now layered with a low, breathy whisper that almost formed my name. I jerked the cord from the wall, but the sound persisted, filling the office, threading beneath my skin. I couldn't stay. I scrambled up, unlocked the deadbolt, and bolted outside. The fog pressed against me, cold and thick as wool, carrying that ruinous sweetness that made me gag. I ran blind toward the gate, not looking at the units, not allowing myself to think. But my feet slowed, dragged by something deeper than exhaustion. A compulsion, a sense that I was being pulled toward the back row. I stopped in front of Unit 117, breath burning in my chest. The padlock was gone. The door stood open, just a sliver, and the darkness inside was absolute, swallowing my flashlight beam. I heard nothing, but the air around the threshold buzzed like a nest of invisible insects. Somewhere behind me, the footsteps resumed. This time, unmistakably close. Slow, shuffling, circling. I should have run. I should have screamed, or called for help, or forced myself awake if this was a dream. But I couldn't move. I watched as a shape formed in the blackness of the open unit. Not